One of the things that I wanted to understand and learn about in my time in Spain was Spain's relationship to race and their history of racism compared to the United States. And one of the things that I found was that there were some similarities, but there were a lot of differences. And one of the main differences that I noticed was that Spain's relationship with racism is a lot less historic than that of the United States. When you ask someone after Franco's dictatorship about 40, 45 years ago whether Spain was generally a racist nation, you would get the answer that no, of course not. And I think that was true to an extent. But the main reason that it wasn't was because at that time there wasn't a lot of immigration. But in the last 30 years, Spain's economy relied on tourism and had a lot of tourists and a lot of immigration, you saw that racism started to emerge in Spain. And this is a lot different than the US, where you have, in the start of the emergence of the United States, right at the beginning, in the 1600s, you have the US economy relying on slavery, taking black people from Africa and using them for labor. And this is a trend that has existed from the 1600s since the inception of the United States to its modern day, where you see the exploitation of black and brown people to for the business establishment and the white political elite to benefit from and profit off. And this has been the long history of the United States, whether it's slavery, whether it's Jim Crow, segregation, whether it's lynchings, whether it's more recently with housing segregation and redlining and the criminal justice system, mass incarceration. You see a strong history and evolution of systematic racism in the United States, and that's not so prevalent in Spain. And this long history of race and racism in the United States has led to, in the last 50, 60 years, something that's called colorblind racism. And colorblind racism relates to people in the States who generally don't want to consider themselves or the nation racist, but engage and benefit off of racism and systematic and institutionalized racism. So that history in the US has led to now modern day people disavowing racism publicly, and sort of individualized accounts of racism are definitely generally not accepted, but you still see racism, people thriving and benefiting off of racism. So, and that has led to people kind of ignoring race as a concept and not fully reconciling with race and racial history. So people would not really dare to say things like the N-word or call people out or have open discussions about race. And like I said, individual racism is looked down upon and frowned upon. But in the Spain and other parts of Europe, I noticed that they are more open to talk about race. And I had many different encounters with people, locals in Spain, who would talk about race openly to my face, ask me where I'm from, if I'm related to Barack Obama. Someone came up to me and called me Negro right to my face. And none of this is really out of spite or out of sort of negative like hatred towards me, but it was more just an open, more blunt conversation about race and how race is a part of me and part of people's identity. And I think that was a huge difference that I noticed and experienced in Spain compared to the US, that because there wasn't this systematic, institutionalized, long history of race, that it wasn't as looked down upon to talk about race openly with people of different races. But I do think that there was more feelings towards immigration and tourism and negative tourism, especially from lower income people, than there was sort of racism. And I think a lot, I felt that as an American and as an outsider, that there was more of a history of, and the more of a sort of prevalence of being disliked because of where I am and me coming in and disrupting the economy, disrupting people as a tourist, as opposed to because I'm black. And in that sense, I felt even more American, and I felt even more American sometimes than I do in America. The idea that people rejecting me because I'm an American and bunching me in with all Americans, both white, black, brown, any sort of race, was a different experience and one that I wouldn't necessarily feel in America. So there was definitely a lot of differences, but and a lot of similarities. And I think the main thing is that Spain is just recently, in the last half a century, grappling with race and the concept of race, and this has led to sort of more of a blunt conversation about race and less systemic racism now. And I think it'll be interesting to see how that transforms as more immigration and more people from different countries and different backgrounds make their way into Spain, and the economy and the country becomes more globally integrated.